Once upon a time, there lived a woman named Maya in a quiet town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests. She was 32 years old, but her eyes carried the weariness of someone much older. Every morning, she woke up with a heavy feeling in her chest, as if invisible stones were pressing down on her heart. Her mind was like a wild river that never stopped flowing, filled with thoughts that rushed and crashed against each other without pause. From the moment she opened her eyes until late at night when exhaustion finally pulled her into restless sleep, Maya's mind raced constantly. She replayed old conversations, thinking about what she should have said 5 years ago, 10 years ago. She worried about things that hadn't happened yet, imagining terrible scenarios that might never come true. Her thoughts were like birds that wouldn't stop flying in circles inside her head, never landing, never resting. Her friends had slowly stopped calling her. When they did meet, they noticed that Maya was never truly present. Her body sat beside them, but her mind was somewhere far away, lost in worries and regrets. Her family watched with concern as the light in her eyes dimmed month by month. Her hands shook when she tried to hold a cup of tea. She had forgotten how to laugh freely, how to enjoy a simple, sunny day, how to live without the constant noise in her mind. One crisp autumn morning, Maya walked through the marketplace to buy vegetables. The air smelled of fresh bread and ripe apples, but she barely noticed. As she passed by a tea stall, she heard two elderly women talking in low voices. One woman leaned close to the other and said, "My cousin's daughter went to see her. She walked for 4 days into the northern mountains to find the woman who lives by Mirror Lake. The other woman nodded knowingly. "Ah yes, I've heard of her. Amara, they call her. She used to be a famous doctor in the city, helping people whose minds were sick with worry and fear. She helped hundreds of people, maybe thousands. Then one day, she left everything behind and went to live alone in the mountains. They say she sits by that lake, and sometimes, if you're lucky enough to find her, she shares her wisdom." Something stirred deep in Maya's chest. It wasn't hope exactly, because she had stopped believing in hope a long time ago. It was more like a tiny spark, a whisper that said, perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way out of this endless mental prison she lived in. She stood frozen, listening to every word the women said about the location of Mirror Lake and how to find the path through the mountains. That very afternoon, without telling anyone where she was going, Maya packed a small bag with bread, cheese, water, and a warm blanket. She left a simple note for her family, saying she needed to go away for a while and would return soon. Then she began walking north, toward the mountains that stood like sleeping giants against the horizon. The journey was harder than anything Maya had ever done. The first day, the path was clear and easy, winding through familiar farmlands and meadows. But by the second day, she entered the forest where the trees grew so thick that sunlight barely reached the ground. Her feet developed painful blisters. Rain came on the third day, soaking through her clothes and chilling her to the bone. She slipped on wet rocks, scratched her arms on thorny bushes, and twice completely lost the path and had to backtrack for hours. Several times, she thought about giving up and going home. Her mind, cruel as always, told her she was foolish, that this journey was pointless, that no one could help her. But each time she considered turning back, she remembered the weight in her chest, the endless exhausting thoughts, and she forced herself to keep walking, one foot in front of the other. Just one more step, then another. On the morning of the fourth day, exhausted and hungry, Maya climbed over a rocky ridge and suddenly stopped in absolute wonder. Before her lay the most beautiful sight she had ever seen. Mirror Lake stretched out like an enormous piece of polished silver, so perfectly still that it reflected the sky and mountains with flawless clarity. The water was so calm that Maya couldn't tell where the real mountains ended and their reflections began. It looked as if the world had been folded in half, creating two identical realities meeting at the surface of the water. On the far shore, she could see a small wooden cabin with smoke rising gently from its chimney. Near the water's edge, sitting on a large flat rock, was a figure. Maya's heart began beating faster. She walked carefully around the lake, her tired legs struggling with each step. As she got closer, she could see that the figure was a woman, with long silver hair tied loosely at the back of her neck. She appeared to be in her 60s, dressed in simple clothes, and she sat very still. Watching the lake with calm eyes, Maya approached slowly, suddenly feeling nervous. When she was a few feet away, she cleared her throat softly and asked, "Excuse me, are you Amara?" The woman turned her head and looked at Maya with dark, gentle eyes that seemed to see right through to her soul. She studied Maya's face for a long moment, taking in the dark circles under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the exhaustion written in every line of her face. Then she nodded slowly. All of Maya's carefully planned words disappeared. Instead, everything came pouring out in a rush. "I can't stop thinking. My mind never ever stops. I wake up thinking and go to sleep thinking, and even in my dreams I'm thinking. I remember embarrassing things I did when I was 12 years old like they happened yesterday. I worry about losing my job even though my boss says I do good work. I imagine terrible things happening to people I love. I'm so tired all the time, but I can't sleep properly because my thoughts won't let me rest. I feel like I'm drowning and I don't know how to swim anymore. Everyone says just relax, just don't worry so much, but they don't understand. I can't control it. Please, I've walked for 4 days to find you. Can you help me? Is there any way to make this stop?" Amara listened to every word without interrupting, her expression never changing, showing neither pity nor judgment. When Maya finally fell silent, breathing hard, tears running down her cheeks, Amara stood up slowly. She was tall and moved with the grace of someone completely comfortable in their own body. She looked at Maya and said in a quiet, clear voice, "Yes, I can help you. But first, you must do something for me." She walked to her cabin and disappeared inside. Maya stood there, waiting, her heart full of hope and fear mixed together. After a minute, Amara emerged carrying a wooden bowl. It was simple and beautiful, carved from dark wood and polished smooth. She had filled it with water from the lake. The water sat perfectly still in the bowl, like a small circular mirror reflecting the sky. Amara walked back to Maya and carefully handed her the bowl. "I need you to do something very specific," she said, looking directly into Maya's eyes. "Do you see that tall pine tree standing alone on the far side of the lake?" She pointed across the water to where a single magnificent pine tree rose above all the others, its green needles dark against the sky. Maya nodded. "I want you to walk all the way around the lake to that tree, and then walk back here to me. The path is not easy. There are rocks and roots and uneven ground. But you must carry this bowl of water, and you must not create a single ripple on the surface, not one. The water must remain as still and calm as it is right now. Do you understand?" Maya looked down at the bowl in her hands. The water was indeed perfectly still, reflecting the clouds above like a tiny piece of sky she could hold. The task seemed simple enough, though she wasn't sure what it had to do with her racing thoughts. But she had come all this way, and she trusted that this wise woman had a reason for asking. "I understand," Maya said. "I won't let the water ripple." She began walking along the shoreline, her eyes fixed on the surface of the water. Immediately, she realized this was much harder than it looked. The shore was covered with smooth, round stones that shifted under her feet. With her very first step, she placed her foot on a wobbly rock, and her body tilted slightly to the side. Instantly, tiny ripples appeared on the water's surface, spreading outward in delicate circles. Maya froze completely, her breath caught in her throat. She stood motionless, watching as the ripples gradually faded and the water returned to perfect stillness. Only then did she take another step, this time much more carefully. She realized she needed to completely change how she walked. She couldn't move at her normal pace. She couldn't let her mind wander for even a second. Every single step required total attention. She had to look ahead to see where she would place her foot, test the ground gently to make sure it was stable, shift her weight slowly and deliberately, and constantly watch the water to make sure it stayed calm. When a small breeze came across the lake, she had to adjust her grip on the bowl to keep it level. When a branch stuck out across the path, she couldn't just push through it quickly. She had to stop, carefully navigate around it, making sure the bowl never tilted. Step by step, she made her way around the lake. Time seemed to slow down and become strange. Minutes felt like hours, but also, somehow, the time passed without her really noticing. The sun moved across the sky. The light changed from bright morning gold to softer afternoon amber. Maya was aware of these changes the way you're aware of music playing in another room. But her focus never left the water in the bowl. Something unusual was happening to her as she walked with such complete concentration. Her breathing began to slow down naturally. Her shoulders, which had been hunched up near her ears for months, gradually lowered and relaxed. She noticed that her jaw had been clenched tight. Her teeth pressed together, and she gently loosened it. Her mind, that wild river that never stopped rushing, began to quiet. There was no room for worried thoughts about the future when she needed to watch this next step so carefully. There was no space for replaying embarrassing memories when she had to focus on keeping the bowl level as she stepped over a fallen log. Her entire world narrowed down to this moment, this breath, this step, this circle of still water. A butterfly with bright orange wings landed on a flower near her path. Normally, Maya would have thought about how beautiful it was, or remembered another butterfly she saw years ago, or worried about whether butterflies were becoming extinct. But now she simply noticed it in her peripheral vision and kept walking. A bird sang a complex melody from the trees above. Maya heard it, but didn't get lost in thinking about it. Everything became simple. Just walking, just breathing, just watching the water stay calm. When she finally reached the tall pine tree on the far side of the lake, she paused for a moment. She felt different, though she couldn't quite name how. Lighter somehow, less burdened. She took a deep breath, turned carefully, and began the journey back. The return trip required the same intense focus. By now, her legs were tired and her arms ached from holding the bowl. But her mind was clearer than it had been in years. The sun was beginning to set as Maya approached Amara again, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink and purple. Long shadows stretched across the ground. Maya walked the final steps and stopped in front of the older woman. The water in the bowl still perfectly calm, not a single ripple disturbing its mirror-like surface. Amara smiled and gently took the bowl from Maya's tired hands, setting it down on the rock beside her. She looked at Maya with warm, knowing eyes and asked, "Tell me, what did you see on your walk around the lake?" Maya opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. She realized with surprise that she couldn't remember seeing very much at all. The question confused her. Amara continued, her voice gentle. "Did you notice the family of otters playing in the shallow water on the north shore? Did you see the eagles circling above the cliffs, riding the air currents? Did you hear the wind moving through the aspen trees, making the leaves sound like rain? Did you watch the sunset painting the mountains in shades of rose and gold? Did you smell the pine sap and the wild sage growing along the path?" Maya felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "No," she admitted quietly. "I didn't see or hear any of those things. I was looking at the water the whole time. I was so focused on not making ripples that I didn't notice anything else around me. I'm sorry. Did I do it wrong?" But Amara's smile grew wider, and her eyes sparkled with something that looked like joy. "No, my dear child. You didn't do it wrong. You did it exactly right. Perfectly right." She gestured for Maya to sit down beside her on the rock. Maya sat, her tired body grateful for the rest. Amara spoke quietly but clearly. "Now tell me this. During all those hours you spent walking around this lake, carrying that bowl of water, where were your anxious thoughts? Where were your worries about the future? Where were your regrets about the past? Where was that river of endless thinking that never lets you rest?" Maya's eyes went wide as understanding crashed over her like a wave. They hadn't been there. For those hours, for the first time in longer than she could remember, her mind had been completely quiet, not empty, but filled with only one thing, the present moment, the task she was doing right now, the water that must not ripple. "They were gone," Maya whispered, her voice full of wonder. "I wasn't thinking about anything except carrying the bowl. My mind was completely calm." Amara nodded. "Yes, that is the answer you have been searching for. Your mind is not broken, Maya. There is nothing wrong with you. Your mind is actually a wonderful, powerful tool, working exactly as it should. The problem is that you have been trying to carry too many things at once. You have been asking your mind to hold the past, the present, and the future all at the same time, plus all your fears and worries and regrets. That is too heavy a load for anyone to carry." She picked up a small smooth stone and tossed it gently into the lake. They watched the ripples spread outward in perfect circles. "When you carried that bowl of water, You gave your mind a single focus in the present moment. There was no room left for anything else. That is the secret to peace. Not fighting your thoughts, not trying to force them away, not feeling guilty for having them. Simply filling the present moment so completely that there is no space for the thoughts to take over. Maya felt tears running down her face, but these were different from the tears she usually cried. These weren't tears of frustration or despair or exhaustion. These were tears of relief, of understanding, of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could actually live differently. But how do I do this in my normal life? Maya asked, her voice shaking. I can't walk around carrying a bowl of water everywhere I go. I have to work and cook and talk to people and do 100 things every day. Amara laughed, a warm sound like wind chimes. No, you cannot carry a bowl everywhere, but you can bring the same quality of attention to everything you do. The bowl was just a teacher, showing you what it feels like to be fully present. Now you must practice bringing that presence to your everyday life. She stood up and gestured for Maya to follow her into the cabin. Inside, it was simple and beautiful. Everything had its place. Everything was clean and cared for. Amara began preparing dinner, and Maya watched carefully. She noticed how Amara did everything with complete attention. When she washed vegetables, she just washed vegetables, feeling the water running over her hands, noticing the colors and textures. When she chopped carrots, she just chopped carrots, listening to the sound of the knife on the cutting board, making each cut deliberate and clean. This is the practice, Amara said as she worked. When you wash dishes, just wash dishes. Feel the temperature of the water. Notice the soap bubbles. Focus on the circular motion of cleaning each plate. When you eat, just eat. Taste each bite. Notice the textures and flavors. Chew slowly. When you walk, just walk. Feel your feet touching the ground. Notice your breathing. Observe the world around you with fresh eyes, as if seeing it for the first time. Maya stayed beside Mirror Lake for 3 more days. Amara didn't give formal lessons or long speeches. She simply lived her life, and Maya watched and learned. She saw how Amara would sit by the lake for an hour, doing nothing, just watching the water and listening to the birds. She noticed how Amara did even tiny tasks, like folding a blanket or sweeping the floor, with the same careful attention Maya had given to carrying the bowl. On the morning of the 4th day, Maya knew it was time to return home. She felt different, changed in some fundamental way. She bowed deeply to Amara, gratitude filling her heart. Thank you, she said. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. You've shown me how to find peace. Amara smiled and placed a hand gently on Maya's shoulder. Remember, you will not be perfect at this. Your mind will wander hundreds of times every day. Thoughts will come rushing back. That is natural and human. The practice is not to never have wandering thoughts. The practice is simply noticing when your mind has drifted away from the present moment, and then gently, kindly, bringing it back. Again and again and again. That is all. That is everything. The journey home seemed shorter, though it was the same difficult path through the mountains. Maya practiced what she had learned with every step. When her mind began worrying about what her family would say, about her sudden disappearance, she noticed the thought, acknowledged it, and brought her attention back to the feeling of walking, the sound of leaves crunching under her feet, the smell of pine trees in the air. It wasn't easy. Sometimes she could only stay present for a few breaths before her mind wandered again, but those few breaths of peace were real. They were possible, and if she could find peace for a few breaths, maybe she could find it for a minute. And if for a minute, maybe for an hour. Step by step, just like walking around the lake. When Maya arrived home 5 days after she had left, her family rushed to greet her, full of questions and concern. But they stopped short when they saw her face. Something was different. She looked rested despite the difficult journey. Her eyes were clearer. When she hugged them, she was really there, really present, not lost in her own thoughts. In the weeks and months that followed, Maya began living differently. She started each morning by making tea with complete attention, watching the steam rise, smelling the herbs, feeling the warmth of the cup. She took walks not to get somewhere, but simply to walk, noticing the trees and sky and birds. When people spoke to her, she practiced really listening, not planning what she would say next while they were still talking. It wasn't a magical cure. Her old patterns of anxious thinking tried to return constantly. Some days were harder than others. Sometimes she would realize she had spent hours lost in worried thoughts about the future or regrets about the past. But now she had a way back. She would remember the bowl of water, the still surface, the feeling of being completely present, and she would return to now. Just this breath, just this step, just this moment. Years passed. Maya never became perfect at staying present, but she no longer needed to be perfect. She had learned that peace was not a destination to reach, but a practice to return to. Again and again, moment by moment, the weight that had pressed on her chest for so long gradually lifted. She learned to laugh again, to enjoy simple pleasures, to live in her life instead of just thinking about it. People noticed the change in her and sometimes asked what had happened. She would tell them about Mirror Lake, about Amara, and about the bowl of water. Some understood immediately and felt their own hope kindle. Others thought it sounded too simple to be true. A few even made the difficult journey themselves. Though not all of them found the cabin or the wise woman, Amara appeared only to those who truly needed her teaching at that moment in their lives. 10 years after her journey to Mirror Lake, Maya was sitting in her garden on a warm summer afternoon, pulling weeds with slow, careful movements. She felt the earth between her fingers, noticed the particular shade of green in each leaf, heard the bees humming among the flowers, and suddenly she realized something that made her smile. She was happy, not the temporary happiness that comes from getting something you want, but a deep, quiet contentment that came from being fully alive in each passing moment. She still had thoughts, still had worries and plans and memories, but they no longer controlled her. They were like clouds passing through the sky, and she had learned not to be swept away by every storm. She thought of Amara sometimes, wondering if the old woman was still living beside Mirror Lake, still teaching the secret of the bowl of water to desperate travelers who needed to find their way home to the present moment. It had been such a simple lesson, really. Not fighting her thoughts, but learning to focus completely on what was right in front of her, living one moment at a time, one breath at a time, one step at a time. Just like carrying a bowl of water along a rocky shore, watching carefully to keep the surface perfectly still, perfectly calm, perfectly present. And in that presence, she had found everything she had been searching for: peace, joy, freedom. Not somewhere far away, but right here, right now, in this very moment, the only moment that ever truly exists. So remember, if your mind feels like a storm that never stops, if your thoughts race and swirl and keep you trapped in worry and regret, the answer is simpler than you think. You don't need to fight your thoughts or make them go away. You just need to find your bowl of water, your practice of presence, whatever helps you come fully into this moment right now. It might be washing dishes with complete attention, or walking while really feeling each step, or listening to music without doing anything else at the same time. The power to find peace has always been within you. It is waiting for you in this breath, this heartbeat, this present moment. All you have to do is come home to it again and again, as many times as it takes. If this story touched your heart and helped you understand something important, please subscribe to Easy English, Tales for more stories that will inspire you and teach you valuable lessons for life. Remember, you are stronger and more capable than you think. Start living in the present moment and watch how your life begins to transform. Until next time, take care of yourself and practice being present, one moment at a time.